We're going to cheat the system here, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to go through and use the data that we have from high-stakes fantasy football drafts that have been going on since April with real United States dollars on the line. And we are going to be comparing that to what you're going to find in your ESPN, in your Yahoo, in your casual redraft format this next season. That way we can help you show where the number one drafters are going at the wide receiver position and who you should possibly be looking to take at an insane value in your casual redraft league. Starting off with our first guy is a great example of this in Chris Olave. Now, if you're going to go ahead and look at Chris Olave in underdog drafts, in FFPC drafts, this is the wide receiver 12 off the board. Whereas if you're going over to ESPN formats, he is the wide receiver 16. And what makes this an even greater gap is just all the running backs that are going to be drafted between these spots. Because if you head over to underdog drafts, right now you have to take Chris Olave in the middle of the second round. Whereas in ESPN drafts, you're able to get Chris Olave in the middle of the fourth. Now, this goes back to our overall draft strategy that we have to be making that adjustment. If you're playing in that casual ESPN format and you know in your redraft league, you're going to get insane wide receiver values in the middle rounds. There, it makes sense to grab the elite level tight end early. There, it makes sense to grab your elite level running back. That way you can go ahead and take Chris Olave in the middle rounds. And if we go ahead and look into this Olave profile, I mean, yeah, on the surface, not phenomenal this past year, right? Wide receiver 27 from a per game perspective. I mean, he averaged only 69 receiving yards per game. He barely scored any touchdowns. But if we dive under the hood, if we look at the advanced metrics and go over to RotoViz and look at all rookie wide receivers since the year 2000 to have a comparable rookie season to Chris Olave, you had AJ Green, Mike Evans, Julio Jones, Terry McLaurin, Amari Cooper, Andre Johnson, Michael Clayton. Now, if we're going to go ahead and look at what all these guys did in their second season, you had AJ Green, Mike Evans, both averaging over 80 receiving yards per game. You had Andre Johnson, Amari Cooper, Terry McLaurin, Julio Jones, all averaging over 70 receiving yards per game as a year two player. I love Olave's profile. I mean, I loved him as a rookie. He dominated. Now you're getting that quarterback upgrade with Derek Carr. So, hell, I'm all about drafting Olave. I think the high-stakes drafters know what they're doing here, being willing to push up Chris Olave into the range that he's being drafted. Now, here it's been a little bit difficult for me to take Calvin Ridley. Y'all know I've already done like 250 underdog drafts this year, and in underdog drafts, Calvin Ridley is going as the wide receiver 16. Calvin Ridley is going in the middle of the third round, and I'm sorry, I haven't taken a lot of Calvin Ridley there, but if we go over and look at where he's being drafted in ESPN drafts, there is the wide receiver 26 off the board. Instead of having to go ahead and take Calvin Ridley in the middle of the third round, you are getting a much more appealing price tag on him, with Calvin Ridley currently going at pick 59 and you getting him at the 5-6 turn. Now with Ridley, this is an elite level ceiling player, so yeah, I want to be taking that swing in the middle rounds on someone who can easily go out there and be a top 5 wide receiver at the position if everything goes right. It's all about the cost that you're getting that guy at, right? I mean, in those ESPN drafts, Calvin Ridley going after Terry McLaurin, after Mike Evans, after Deontay Johnson, after DJ Moore, after, DeAndre Hopkins, there probably makes sense to go ahead and pull the trigger, because if you go back and look at what we've had for Calvin Ridley, now, yeah, 2021 wasn't great in terms of his raw fantasy points, but keep in mind he was playing with Matt Ryan, who is literally nothing at that point of his NFL career. I mean, what's impressive is in that small stretch of games, Calvin Ridley still managed to see a 30% team target share, which is just straight up ridiculous. But if we're going back to 2020, this is the special season, right? Even on the surface, Calvin Ridley was the wide receiver 4 from a points per game perspective. But if you take away the games where Calvin Ridley played fewer than 70% of the snaps, Calvin Ridley actually jumped up to being the wide receiver 2 only behind Michael Thomas this season. That's the ceiling that you have. You have the elite level quarterback play with Trevor Lawrence. Now, what's interesting is if you're going to go ahead and look at the player props on Underdog right now, I mean, they actually have Calvin Ridley at a mark that would show you probably don't want to draft him in those high stakes underdog drafts. Calvin Ridley there, 6 receiving touchdowns, 855 receiving yards for his player prop. If you're going to compare that to some of the other wide receivers going later, like for example, Mike Evans is going like 3 rounds after Calvin Ridley in those underdog drafts. They have Mike Evans at 950 receiving yards. So this goes back to just seeing what they have in those regular fantasy football leagues. I mean, the projections line up that maybe the Ridley price point on ESPN makes a little more sense. And 100% I'm fine drafting him with the 5-6 turn into casual format. And of course, real quick side note, if you want to get into a draft with us on the live stream, or if you want to go check out any of those player props, now is the time to do so, because Underdog just launched the puppy tournament, which is a $5 buy-in, $500,000 prize pool. It's $75,000 for first place. What's crazy is we actually had a member of the flock, Nick, win that $75,000 last year on Underdog. You know, I won $150,000 drafting 700 teams because it's best ball. No time commitment at all during the year. It's the same spot. You can find all those player props. And when you sign up with promo code FLOCK, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, a free trial to flockfantasy.com. You can find that link both in the comment section as well as the description in this video. And also, now you got to go over there because they have a free Patrick Mahomes bet up until July 22nd on Underdog Fantasy. So please don't waste any time. Go make sure you're taking advantage of that right now before you forget. Now, going over to our next guy, Jerry Jeudy is a wide receiver that is pretty expensive, right? I mean, he's the wide receiver 20 in high stakes drafts. So wide receiver 20 on Underdog, wide receiver 20 in the FFPC, but wide receiver 27 in ESPN contests. So it's the difference between being a mid wide receiver 2 and a mid wide receiver 3. And hell, if I can get Jerry Jeudy as my wide receiver 3, that's going to be something that I am extremely excited about. This is a wide receiver that was the wide receiver 21 from a points per game basis last season. He's still incredibly young. Like, the man's younger than Kenny Pickett. And what's most impressive about Jerry Jeudy is if you look at how he finished this past year. If you were looking at Jerry Jeudy coming back from his injury, starting in week 13, there are only 5 wide receivers to outscore Jerry Jeudy in fantasy football. Those guys being A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Keenan Allen, Devonta Smith, and CeeDee Lamb. So you saw that Jerry Jeudy breakout at the end of the year, and I can't sit here and say Jerry Jeudy's going to be a wide receiver 1 this next season, blah, blah, blah. But what I can say is it's a wide receiver that has a lot of upside. Now, the one red flag that you're going to see with Jerry is the situation changing this next year for the better, but also for the worse, right? I mean, because this should be a much better Denver Broncos offense. It can't really be worse than what it was last year with Nathaniel Hackett and Russell Wilson. They have Sean Payton coming over, but also, this is where I am a little hesitant going all in with Jerry Jeudy in those high stakes contests as a mid wide receiver 2. You add in Marvin Mims in the second round. You're also getting Tim Patrick back and healthy this next season. Presumably, Courtland Sutton's going to be healthy as well. Javonte Williams will be healthy at some point. They have a pretty good tight end going into year 2. So this is a team that should be better on the whole, but at the same time, should have significantly better weapons all across the offense. I think the price point with Jeudy in ESPN leagues is a smash. Like, there, you're getting him at pick 61. You're getting him in the 6th round. And in comparison to those high stakes drafts like Underdog, you're having to take him as a mid wide receiver 2 in the 4th. Now, going over to our next young guy, we have Drake London, wide receiver 31 in ESPN drafts. You have Underdog 22, FFPC 25. So regardless, if you're in that casual format, London's going to be cheaper. There, you're getting him at pick 76. You're getting him behind Kamara, Lockett, Hollywood, Deshaun Watson, Cam Akers, Dalvin Cook. And with London, he wasn't that great if you're looking at just his regular statistics, right? I mean, the man averaged 50 receiving yards per game. The man was the wide receiver 47 from a points per game perspective this past year. But the Atlanta Falcons were a bottom 3 passing offense in the NFL last season, if you're dating back all the way to 2010. So for pretty much the past decade, the Falcons were a bottom 3 passing offense. The only reason they didn't seem like they were horrible is like the worst passing offense in the NFL over the past 10 years. The Chicago Bears last year kind of outshadowed them. But regardless, London just had no shot. Now, if you look at the advanced metrics, the man did average 2 yards per route run, which is pretty damn impressive as a 21-year-old rookie. But what was most impressive as a 21-year-old rookie was him going out there and seeing a 28% team target share on a per game basis. You simply have never seen that from a player this young, ever in the history of the NFL. It's incredible. If we're trying to find some comps that we can give Drake London as a rookie going back to the year 2000, my favorite comp is actually probably going to be Stephon Diggs. Someone else that dominated with his target share year one, but didn't score a million fantasy points, but showed that he was an elite level talent. And when his situation changed for the better, he did put up a zillion fantasy points. So with London, definitely going to root for our guy, right? I mean, I want the Atlanta Falcons to be better with Bijan Robinson this next year. Now, Christian Kirk, someone that we can talk about just for 1 second. I mean, wide receiver 32 in ESPN drafts, wide receiver 27 on Underdog, wide receiver 27 on the FFPC. Just seems like in general, high stakes drafters are willing to go out of their way and saying that the Jacksonville Jaguars will be a much better offense this next year compared to what we've seen in years past. Seems like a pretty good bet with Trevor Lawrence. Now, going over to our next guy, Jackson Smith-Njigba, wide receiver 32 in Underdog drafts, wide receiver 38 on the FFPC, and wide receiver 40 in ESPN drafts. Now, I understand the situation's not great for JSN year one, right? You have Metcalf, you have Lockett. I know they're great wide receivers, but JSN was a better prospect than either of them. And I think in the long term, Jackson Smith-Njigba is the wide receiver one for the Seattle Seahawks. If you were looking at JSN dominating as a sophomore on an Ohio State roster that also hosted Chris Olave, who is a senior, Garrett Wilson, who is a junior, Marvin Harrison Jr., and another wide receiver at Ohio State that will be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft next season. And the fact that JSN was the wide receiver one on that team, our metrics wide receiver model going back to the year 2014 has only had 6 wide receivers score similarly. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, Amari Cooper, Sammy Watkins, Calvin Ridley. The only quote-unquote bust you can put on this list is Sammy Watkins, and I'd make the argument that Watkins, it was a bust for how high he went in the NFL draft, top 5 pick, but still was a good wide receiver in the NFL. I am all in on JSN the talent. I know the situation isn't great, but I'm one of the very few people that is willing to go out of my way and say that he will be better than Tyler Lockett this next season. At least by the end of the year when it matters from a fantasy football perspective, I'm going to go JSN in the fantasy football playoffs this year. And if you're looking at where he's going in ESPN drafts there, he's picked 96. He's going right after Odell Beckham Jr. and right before Jacoby Myers. Whereas you're looking at Tyler Lockett at pick 73. Give me JSN at that value. Now, our next guy, Treylon Burks, is going as the wide receiver 32 in FFPC drafts, going as the wide receiver 35 in Underdog drafts, and the wide receiver 42 in ESPN contest. Now, what I want to be monitoring with Treylon Burks will be the situation on if they decide to go out there and sign DeAndre Hopkins. Because if they sign Hopkins, I'm sorry, Treylon Burks is not going to be in an offense that has enough passing volume for him to go out there and be relevant in fantasy football, right? I mean, you really only have so many passing yards to go around if you're the Tennessee Titans. And if you're going to be relevant in this offense, you kind of have to be the unquestioned alpha wide receiver one. And as of now, Treylon Burks is just that on this roster. Now, he was a phenomenal prospect coming out of school. Obviously didn't have a great year one, but he was riddled with injuries through the course of the season as well as before the year. I don't know. I mean, they like Treylon Burks enough to trade away A.J. Brown to avoid paying him and drafting Treylon Burks in the first round last season. I like the price point in ESPN drafts if you have no DeAndre Hopkins coming over. Now, going over to our next guy, we're going to be looking at Jordan Addison, another rookie here. And in general, what I like doing in fantasy football in the first place, and especially in shallow redraft leagues, is chasing upside, upside, upside. In reality, if you're playing in a league where you're only starting 2 wide receivers and 2 flexes, will Jacoby Myers ever make a difference? No, he won't. Maybe in an underdog draft where it's best ball, and obviously you have to go so deep, you have to go 18 rounds. There may be a player like Myers will make a difference. There may be a player like Odell will make a difference. But if you're playing in your casual redraft format, why are we not doing everything that we can just to exclusively chase upside, which Jordan Addison has a lot of? Now, if we go over to his prospect model comps, it's not like Addison is next to just massive hits as you saw with Jackson Smith-Njigba. The one issue with Jordan Addison from a prospect perspective is the fact that he's a little bit undersized. Now, you did have Devonta Smith overcoming this, but keep in mind, Devonta Smith also is a wide receiver that put up one of the best collegiate wide receiver seasons of all time. So I don't know if we can say Addison is going to succeed just because Devonta Smith did. I think Smith was definitely a better prospect. But nonetheless, you do have some comps like Devontae Adams, Michael Thomas, Allen Robinson, Juju Smith-Schuster, all of whom were massive hits. But you also have a Josh Doxson in this range. You also have a Corey Davis. You also have a Laviska Shenault. You also have a Devin Funchess. I don't know. I think it's a great situation. I think that Addison can find success. And then our last guy on this list will be Quentin Johnston, just continuing to hammer in rookies being massive values. We are chasing upside, upside, upside. The fact that Quentin Johnston right now is going behind Jeff Wilson Jr., Alan Lazard, Jarrett McKinnon, Rondale Moore, Cortland Sutton, DJ Chark, Juju Smith-Schuster. It's kind of wild. I understand you're part behind Keenan Allen, you're part behind Mike Williams, but one, there's a non-0% chance, and I'm not saying it's likely, but it's a non-0% chance that Johnston is the best wide receiver on this roster by the time we get to the middle part of the year. And on top of this, if we are looking at Quentin Johnston, you also have the uncertainty of what if Mike Williams or Keenan Allen, both of whom have seen injuries over the past few seasons, were to miss time this next year and Johnston were to elevate himself as the wide receiver 2 immediately for Justin Herbert. And he has a great prospect model. I mean, he broke out as a freshman, dominated as a sophomore, declared as a junior, round 1 of the NFL draft, doesn't have the same size concerns as Jordan Addison. Really like Johnston here, but I think that's all we have for this video. Again, thank you so much for checking it out. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play fantasy football. And of course, if you want to get in a draft with us, which we are doing every single day on the live stream, will not miss a day until 2024. Now is the best time to do so with Underdog dropping the puppy tournament. $5 buy-in, $500,000 prize pool. First place prize, $75,000. A member of the flock won it last year. Hopefully we're able to repeat that this season. Also the same spot where you have all those player props you're seeing. And make sure before July 22nd, you're going and taking advantage of the Patrick Mahomes special, more than less than half a passing yard. And yeah, if you sign up with promo code FLOCK with that link in the comment section or description, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. Plus, you're going to get our 2023 fantasy football rankings, as well as a free trial to flockfantasy.com with promo code FLOCK. But I think that's all I have for you. Again, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Really do appreciate you and really hope that we get to see you with the video tomorrow or in the live stream